It was the summer of 2008, a stretch of humid nights where the air hung heavy with the smell of diesel and fried food along Interstate 80 in Nebraska. The rest stop diner, Marla's Diner, sat just off the highway, its neon open 24 hours, sign flickering through clouds of highway dust and moths. Inside, two waitresses, Samantha Lee and Brooke Turner, were finishing their late night shift. Both women were well known by the truckers who stopped by nightly, smiling faces, refilling coffee cups, chatting about weather and road miles. Around 1:30 a.m., the last customer left, and the two women started cleaning tables, humming along to an old jukebox tune that played faintly in the background. Everything about that night seemed perfectly ordinary, until the camera caught its last few seconds of them alive. At 1:42 a.m., the diner's old security footage showed Samantha and Brooke locking the front door, laughing about something one of the truckers had said earlier. They stepped into the warm night air, walking toward their cars parked behind the building. The lot dimly lit by a single flickering lamp. One of them waved toward the highway as if someone had signaled from the road. Then the video feed glitched, static for 4 seconds, before cutting off completely. The next morning, when the day shift cook arrived, both cars were still there, doors unlocked, keys in the ignition, purses on the front seats. Not a single sign of struggle, no broken glass, no tire marks leaving the lot. It was as if the two women had simply evaporated into the Nebraska night. Sheriff's deputies combed through every inch of the area. Dogs were brought in but refused to move past the back dumpster, whining, pulling away as if something about the smell unsettled them. The ground there was sticky, and the air carried an odd sour tang, like spilled vinegar mixed with rot. One deputy noted that the gravel behind the diner seemed damp, though it hadn't rained in days. A greasy trail led from the dumpster to a drain behind the building, as if something thick and wet had been poured out and washed away. Locals started whispering almost immediately about the vinegar air, about how the lights behind Marla's Diner flickered differently that night. By the end of the week, the story of the two missing waitresses had already turned into a legend whispered by truckers along I-80 that only got darker with time. After Samantha and Brooke vanished, Marla's Diner closed within weeks. The booths stayed empty, the coffee pots crusted over, and dust began to swallow the place whole. But the stories didn't stop. They multiplied. Truckers started telling strange tales over their CB radios late at night, warning each other about the I-80 rest stop that felt wrong. Some said when you drove past after midnight, the radio static wasn't random, it hummed like a whisper buried under the white noise. Others swore they saw a woman's reflection in their side mirrors, standing on the edge of the lot, even when no one was there. Her uniform always looked the same: red apron, white shirt, the same kind the missing waitresses used to wear. Locals from nearby Kearney avoided the diner altogether. A few teenagers tried sneaking in one night on a dare, and what they described later was enough to keep people away for good. They said the air inside was cold and wet, even though the power had been off for months. Tables were still set, as if waiting for customers. 2 half-empty glasses of water, 1 straw bent, 1 straw missing. The jukebox in the corner suddenly lit up on its own and played a single warped note before shorting out. And near the back hallway, one of them swore they heard a soft clinking sound, like glass jars tapping together. They ran out screaming before they reached the kitchen. In 2012, A man named Carl Benson bought the property, determined to scrub away the diner's bad reputation. He told the local paper he was going to reopen it as the new Marla's, promising good food, fresh start. For a week, construction crews worked inside, repainting walls and fixing broken tiles. But on the 8th day, Carl left town without warning. When police checked the building, they found his toolbox abandoned in the basement and a handwritten note taped to the door. It read, "The basement hums. Don't go near the barrels." No one ever found Carl Benson again. The property was condemned, boarded up, and forgotten, but the whispers never stopped. Truckers began calling that stretch of highway the Pickle Stop, not out of humor, but out of fear. 12 years had passed since the night Samantha and Brooke vanished, and for most people, the case was little more than a faded memory, an unsolved mystery tucked away in Nebraska's cold case files. But in 2020, a food storage warehouse in Council Bluffs, Iowa, was being cleared for demolition. The place was massive, filled with decades of expired supplies, moldy packaging, and forgotten brands. On the far end of the lot, behind a stack of broken refrigerators and rusted tin shelves, workers found a cluster of 6 industrial pickle barrels, their labels yellowed and peeling. The words, Marla's Diner Supply Co., were still faintly visible under layers of grime. Nobody thought much of it at first, until one worker tried to move one with a forklift and the metal cracked open. The smell that poured out was unlike anything they'd ever encountered. It wasn't just sour. It was wrong, like rot wrapped in vinegar and something chemical. The workers gagged and stumbled back, thinking maybe a raccoon had drowned inside. But when the hazmat team arrived, what they found inside wasn't an animal. Floating just beneath the cloudy, brownish brine was a strand of human hair, blonde long and unmistakably real. A second barrel was unsealed, and within minutes, every person in that room fell silent. What they saw inside didn't look like a body, not anymore, but something that had been preserved, almost mummified by the acid and salt. The liquid had kept the remains intact in a grotesque, jelly-like suspension, turning flesh into something between leather and wax. The discovery shut down the entire site. Federal agents and forensic experts from 3 states were brought in. They carefully opened each barrel, one by one, under floodlights and respirators. Inside were the same things: fragments of bone, fabric, hair, and traces of old diner uniforms that still held faint patterns of red and white stripes. Each barrel was stamped with a shipment date, all from July 2008, the exact month the waitresses disappeared. Even stranger, one of the barrels contained 2 sets of fingerprints belonging to both missing women. The warehouse's old owner insisted he had no idea how the barrels got there. They'd been delivered years before his time. But every paper trail led back to the same dead company, named Marla's Diner Supply Co. And with that, the past came flooding back, thick, sour, and impossible to ignore. The investigation into the pickle barrels led authorities straight back to the woman whose name was still faintly painted on the diner's cracked sign. Marla Henning. At 71, she was living quietly in Clearwater, Florida, in a pale yellow house with white shutters and a front yard of dying roses. Detectives from Nebraska arrived unannounced, showing her photos of the recovered barrels. Marla's reaction was unsettling. She didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her glasses, looked at the pictures for a long moment, and said almost cheerfully, "I haven't seen those old things in years." Her calmness unsettled the room. When they asked about her husband, Hank Henning, she said he passed away in 2010. Heart failure or guilt? She joked, then went quiet. There was something in her tone. A strange pride wrapped in bitterness, as if she was remembering a secret she once promised never to share. Back in Nebraska, detectives began piecing together Hank's history. Before his death, Hank had run a small meat processing business in a rented warehouse, the same one where the barrels were found 12 years later. He specialized in pickling and curing meats, a side hustle that kept the diner stocked with its famous homemade pickles and sauces. Former employees remembered Hank as a man who liked the smell of vinegar too much, often working alone in the early hours, muttering to himself in the cold rooms. When forensic teams dug into his records, they found missing invoices, false company names, and hundreds of gallons of brine solution unaccounted for. One of the shipping manifests even listed 2 undocumented special preservation barrels sent from Marla's diner in July 2008, the same night the women disappeared. Investigators returned to Florida to confront Marla with the evidence. They found her house meticulously organized, shelves filled with old recipe books, jars of dried herbs, and rows of sealed mason jars filled with cloudy liquid. On the kitchen counter lay a worn leather notebook labeled Brine No, 7th preservation batch. Inside, handwritten recipes described mixtures of vinegar, salt, and binding solutions meant to keep tissue intact indefinitely. Some of the pages were stuck together with what looked like dried residue. Marla insisted the recipes were just experiments. Family tradition, she said. But in her garage, beneath a tarp, police discovered a freezer plugged into the wall and humming quietly. It was empty except for one thing: a faded diner name tag with the words Brook Tea etched in rust. When asked about it, Marla smiled faintly and whispered, "Some things just don't spoil like they should." The forensic team spent months analyzing the remains found in the barrels. DNA results confirmed what many already feared. The victims were indeed Samantha Lee and Brooke Turner. But the real horror began when the lab started examining what else was inside the brine. Mixed among the decomposed tissue were strange chemical additives not normally found in food preservation. Compounds used in embalming fluid and industrial adhesive. It was as if someone had tried to perfect the act of keeping something human from decaying. In the bottom of one of the barrels, wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve, investigators found something that shouldn't have been there at all: a small leather journal, sealed tight as though someone wanted it to survive the years submerged. The ink had blood in places, but the words that remained were legible, and they weren't written by either of the missing women. The journal began like a confession, but quickly spiraled into something incoherent, written in shaky, uneven handwriting. The author described voices under the floorboards, at the diner, sounds that wouldn't stop, and the feeling that something lived in the brine once the first batch was poured. One entry said, "They whisper when the vinegar boils. They tell me they're not done yet." Later pages detailed experiments with new mixtures, each more disturbing than the last, describing how the brine fed on sound and kept them still but aware. The final page was dated weeks after the disappearance, the handwriting growing frantic. "They asked me to stay. The brine needs more." Every forensic expert who handled the notebook said the same thing. The pages reeked of vinegar, even after drying for days. It was as if the smell itself refused to die. The journal was sealed in evidence, but the legend didn't stop there. Truckers along I-80 still claim that if you pull over near the old diner lot, you can smell vinegar thick in the air, even though the building's been gone for years. Some say they've seen two women walking along the shoulder of the highway at night, their aprons soaked, their faces pale and glistening, as if they'd just crawled out of something wet. Others have reported hearing the faint sound of glass jars clinking, carried on the wind from the direction of where the diner once stood. Locals still call that place the Pickle Stop, but not as a joke, more like a warning. Because no matter how long the years pass, the scent of what happened there never really leaves. So maybe the barrels were just the beginning. Maybe whatever was sealed inside them wasn't meant to stay quiet forever. Because every year, around the same week, the waitresses disappeared. Something strange happens on that stretch of I-80. Phones lose signal, truck engines stall, and that same sour, choking smell of vinegar seeps through the night air, strong enough to make your eyes water. People say it's just old chemicals leaking from the ground, but drivers who've been through it swear they've seen something else. Two figures standing by the road, watching, waiting, their outlines blurry under the sodium lights. And if you roll your window down just a little, you can hear it, a soft bubbling sound like something fermenting just beneath the earth. So next time you stop for a midnight snack on a lonely highway and you catch that faint whiff of pickle brine in the air, don't look around. Don't follow the smell. Because on I-80, not everything that's preserved is meant to stay dead.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.